Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. My name is Katrina Stanton.
I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
And I'm Steven Zuber. And Eneasz wanted to introduce our guest and topic for the day.
Today we are here with Steve Parker, also known as Young Idealist on Twitter, and he is here to speak with us about...
Street epistemology.
Thank you. I was about to say street evangelism, and I was like, no, that's not right.
No.
Kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't think any of us are super familiar with street epistemology, so Steve has kindly volunteered to bring us up to speed.
Yeah, actually, the first I'd heard of it was when Steve contacted me on Twitter and said, hey, have you heard of this thing before? And I said, no, I haven't, but let me look into it, and it seemed very interesting. I said, hey, Steve, you want to talk about this and fill us in? And Steve, I believe, said yes. Yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent.
Well, he's here, isn't he?
In
So,
fact, street epistemology is something that I've been plotting to try to connect with the rationalist movement for a while now, mainly because it was born of a want to profess and preach rationality to the masses.
Now,
in some little way.
Were you a rationalist first or a street epistemologist first?
Definitely rationalist, fan of Eliezer's, as well as a fan of Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality.
How did you get into this?
Before SE was even...
How did you get into this jam?
Street epistemology?
Yeah.
Or...
Well, rationality. Or both.
Okay.
I'm always curious to hear people's rationality origin story.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I started out learning about Harry Potter and the Methods by a friend. He told me that it was a story that, and he just reads a lot of fan fiction online just randomly, or also like independent works of sorts. And so if there's anything in the sort of nerd grapevine that he happens to find and it's interesting, he tells me about it. And so yeah, him and my other best friend have been fans of H.P. Morph for a few years now. And I definitely got into it post the making of the podcast. So I think you guys were about 2/3 of the way through when I started listening, and then I ended up catching up to the end of the podcast, and I just had to read the rest of it online because I wasn't willing to leave on the cliffhanger that I was stuck at. Right.
I wouldn't have been either.
And it opened me up to learning more and more about Eliezer and the Less Wrong community. And so I just started investigating on my own and started to realize, like, this is what I've actually been feeling and believing and wanting to represent my foundation, like, for the longest time. Like, it's always hard to say what sets you apart from most people as in terms of your ideals or what you want to use to define yourself. And I think rationality is just a great concept in that sense. Like, it's a huge legacy of the entire human race to be able to think rationally and come up with the awesome things that we come up with, from our cultures to our technology. And that all required rational thought on some level, at some base level. And so I loved learning more and more of how to just dig into that and be more of a rationalist myself.
That's fantastic.
I think that's the motivation behind most of us being here, and certainly mine as well. And I was introduced to the proper rationality through HPMOR as well. Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is a lot of what you're saying, I think, was a lot of the chorus and the choir that we all like and can rally behind. So I think that's why a lot of us are here as well.
Did some sort of recruiter show up on Less Wrong and try to get you involved in street epistemology? How did that happen?
Actually, I connected with a good friend of mine. I can say his name because he's a musician trying to get his name out there. Buck Bowen. He and I connected through a local atheist meetup group that he actually was running at the time. And I learned about his music and learned about we got along and traded some feedback on what the atheist movement for us really meant and what it should look like. And then he happened to, somewhere along the way, get connected with Peter Boghossian before his book even came out. Peter Boghossian's book being A Manual for Creating Atheists. And that's where street epistemology was first described and defined and inspired to the masses to give this sort of idea a shot that, like, in the simplest sense, street epistemology is being able to have civil conversations with just anyone about what they believe and why. And it's a sort of methodology on how you can do that and keep it from turning into something where two people who fundamentally disagree want to tear each other's throats out at the end of it.
Okay, so when I first heard the word street epistemology, it brought to mind things like street evangelism, street preachers. So is it ever a situation where you're literally out on the street kind of talking to passersby?
Effectively, it has been. The initial premise wasn't suggesting that you necessarily go up and try to, like, hold a sign and try to ask everybody who passes by what they believe and why. It's more of a methodology for how you can start to engage with anyone who you happen to be talking to and the subject of beliefs comes up. But there are a few people who have turned it into its own little form of evangelism. And what it's really evangelizing is just that people should be more aware of exactly how they themselves can define their own beliefs and exactly what it is that motivates them or inspires them to hold those beliefs in the first place. And it really doesn't have to go much further than that in order to help people think about things that they never otherwise would have thought.
Does it always go into the atheism territory?
Not always.
About religious beliefs?
Nope. It can be applied to religion, politics, conspiracy theories, really just anything that you fundamentally disagree with someone on.
When I was looking into street epistemology, the thing that really caught my eye and made me want to decide to have you on was it seemed that the fundamental question of street epistemology, when I was reading it, is the same as the fundamental question of rationality. There was a lot of focus on saying, ask people what they believe and why they believe it.
Exactly. And one of Peter Boghossian's main points that he emphasizes in A Manual for Creating Atheists is that we need to be of the mindset that if we are wrong and some new information or some new argument we've never heard of before can prove to us or show us that we are wrong, we need to be of a mindset that is open and willing to accept that and learn from that and actually accept the new argument as our own.
Agreed.
Which is exactly something I first came across in the rationalist movement from Eliezer.
And the focus on street epistemology, the other thing that really caught my eye was that we've talked before, I think, with when we were interviewing from Skeptoid.
Brian Dunning,
yes, that there's often a idea that atheism has a bit of a dick problem in that people are often called dicks for the way they confront people. And street epistemology seemed to be very much a reaction to that. How to be nice to people and get them on your side. Is that
correct?
Is that a focus you've noticed?
Yeah, it really is. In a street epistemology conversation, you would actually emphasize learning about the other person and letting them have their own little soapbox to speak from, and you utilize Socratic method to get them to parse out and open up to further questions that they might not have otherwise considered for themselves. And you need to avoid even bringing in your counter arguments or your counter evidence to the table. Instead, you would want something like, so, what I've heard from, like, say if the issue is, or the topic is someone believes in Jesus Christ as Son of God, whatnot, and you ask them their reason, and their reason happens to be, say, because I have faith. Well, the street epistemology response would be, that's interesting. So I've spoken to Muslims who have said that they believe that Muhammad is a prophet from God because they have faith. And a lot of what I'm hearing from the Muslim and from a Christian like yourself is that faith is the reason why they believe. Is that the same thing? Like, is faith of what they mean the same thing as what you mean? And is that enough to justify why they believe in their religion as opposed to yours? So it's kind of like that. You just
have you done this
find a
before?
nice way to. Oh yeah.
What reaction do you get when you ask that sort of a thing?
Well, first to point out what I feel like when I'm doing street epistemology is I feel like on some level I'm patronizing the other person, because to me my questions seem like they're obvious. But what I get is this surprising reaction from most that I use street epistemology with, that they seem to appreciate that you're interested and that they have a chance to talk about, like, or to even think more deeply about the things that they really didn't think of before. It's a very sheer difference. What's that?
Who are the people that you're speaking with? How does this play out in your life?
Well, some of us have gathered on the website blab.io, and on Blab you can have these random discussions with just about anybody who's interested. It's a video chat for 4 people, and then everybody else gets to be on the side chat. And some of us have used Blab to practice our street epistemology. There's also, in my personal life, I've practiced epistemology on my family, with my girlfriend, with my mother, and these are family members and people close to me who believe in things like Christianity that I don't believe in myself. And the result just tends to be that they feel a little closer after the fact. It feels like we actually work something out and understand more about each other by the end of it.
I feel like I went through a similar period in my life right around high school, maybe earlier, is when I sort of lost my religion and was talking with people about it. And, that's when you get into all the exciting circle jerk of reading atheist books and all the fun arguments with religious people. And I had fun, just tearing down my parents' arguments and stuff and being a dick. And then that sort of wore off, and I've, like you said, or like you've experienced, I found that conversations after my goal was to be more amicable was much more rewarding for, I think, both parties involved. There's never really a good time to be an asshole. I take that back. It's not hard to generate examples, but when you're trying to change someone's mind, probably not, right?
Right.
So,
right.
That reminds me, did you ever see, Phil Plait gave a talk a few years ago, which I'm sure is widely circulated on YouTube, called Don't Be a Dick? I think it fits pretty well with what you're describing.
Yeah, I don't know if I saw his before, but I've definitely heard a few talks about how to not be a dick.
Oh yeah, good deal. Yeah, I think his was kind of just not even necessarily how, it was just don't be. And it was sort of with the assumption that everyone knew what being a dick was.
It was a very short talk.
It was literally just those words. No,
Point done.
It can be so hard when you first deconvert, though, because, or I still had all this pent up passion, and it's also sort of this anger at my entire life having been a lie, and everything that I thought was true turns out to be complete crap, and you just want to go to other people and you're like, look at this, can you not see it? Soylent Green is made of people,
Also, Santa Claus
it's
isn't
the same
real.
kind of thing. Yeah, I guess.
Exactly.
Do kids go through the same thing with Santa Claus?
I got in trouble for telling my friends that Santa Claus wasn't real.
Do you remember how you felt when you found that out?
I was pretty proud of myself for figuring it out, and then I didn't hold it against my parents, but I didn't want anybody else to live in the shadows
Yeah.
of such a lie. So, of course, I went and told my friends, and I got slammed. People did not want to hear that there was no Santa. You didn't experience something similar?
And then you can piss off your friends' parents even more by saying, you know all that stuff I just said about Santa? Yeah, Jesus now.
No, I mean, I had that experience about Jesus. I never did about Santa Claus because, Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes, of course.
Right from the start, they're like, yeah, Santa Claus, made up pagan thing. Don't believe him because that's Satan trying to get into your head.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was actually on the other side of it, arguing to defend Santa Claus and wanting a debate at that age.
Nice.
Until my mom finally admitted to me that Santa Claus wasn't real.
Your mom was like, you're too good at this. All the other kids are starting to believe again.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't think they wanted anything to do with me because I was so argumentative.
I'm trying to think of just other things that the street epistemology mindset brings to mind. And Dan Dennett is famous for talking quite a bit about, let's see, it's called Rappaport's Rules, named after the game theorist Anatole Rappaport. It's really short. There's 4 principal things, and 1, you should attempt to re-express your target's position so clearly, vividly, and fairly that your target says, thanks, I wish I thought of putting it that way. 2, you should list any points of agreement, especially if they're not matters of general or widespread agreement. 3, you should mention anything you've learned from your target. 4, only then are you permitted to say so much as a word of rebuttal or criticism. And I think 1 is where most people get tripped up. They're in a good order here. For the most part, especially in an argument, you're not really interested. Well, we are. Many people aren't interested in fully understanding where their opponent is coming from. Now, granted, if you're having a conversation with, an evangelist Christian or something, it's going to be this. You basically know exactly where they're coming from already. But if it's just somebody talking about,
it really depends on the Christian.
Yeah,
There's so many different flavors.
But it's not like I'm going to come across this one church that is going to suddenly convince me that God's real. I think their core premises are about the same.
I don't know about that, Stephen. I think that a lot of churches have different approaches to what God is and how metaphorical it is.
True. And I do want to point out some things that I have learned from doing street epistemology is there is a space for me to actually respect somebody who I otherwise did not have any respect for. Like, I know that I used to be a Christian, and I was fairly strong in that belief once upon a time. But then when I engage Christians now and I try to have that conversation, I've got a long history as well of just feeling like, my God, you just must be too stupid to understand the thing that I'm trying to tell you or trying to talk to you about. But with street epistemology, there's this one example of an individual I met on Blab, and I think I have to forthright say that I think she has a low IQ score, and she says things which contribute to many ills of society that I really dislike. But when I got to hear her express how confident she really felt, what she believed exactly, and why she believed it, and was willing in the comfort of that space, having this street epistemology talk, to actually challenge her own thinking and go through these exercises with us, I have nothing but utter respect for this individual. Like, even though I don't think she's smart, even though I think she does these things which I find are still bad, she has earned my respect through street epistemology.
I think there's a level of respect that has to be granted to anyone who's willing to engage in dialogue, right? It's not like the person who will shout over you and call you an idiot or a heathen or a, what do you call them, a blasphemer or a hedonist or whatever who's going to hell or something. It's the people who get irate, who lose their cool, that it's hard to really respect after a dialogue, right?
I think, Steve, I think it's great that you're opening yourself up to really learning things about why people think the things they do and why people believe the things they do. And I imagine that people come up with excellent points sometimes, and that you do interact with intelligent people who disagree with you, right?
Correct.
That was a huge prompt there.
Yeah. In fact, I always keep it in mind something aside from street epistemology and the rationalist movement. I think of when somebody makes a good point, I try to keep in mind positive reinforcement. Like, ultimately, I want to help train them to be more rational people. So if they make a rational point, I need to give them a part of what they're really hoping for, which is credit. Just say, you know what, that's a really great point. That is a really, really good point. I want you to know that's a good point. Because this, and this, you have to show them that you respect them, especially when they are making a sound argument.
So, a question that we've asked ourselves several times on this podcast, what is the benefit of doing this?
I would say the big picture benefit that everyone should have in mind if they decide to engage in street epistemology is that right now we have a sort of world culture that does not appreciate having difficult conversations. A lot of people avoid these conversations because they're uncomfortable, and that becomes more and more of a problem because we isolate and we still end up going to war over things that we disagree on, yet we don't have enough of this civil engagement where we can actually say, okay, wait, let me understand exactly what you think and why you think it, and then we can move on from there. We don't have these conversations most of the time because people end up so locked in their camps, unwilling to just have the conversation. No, even accept that you're going to disagree, but at least know what it is you're actually disagreeing about and why you disagree about it.
I think that's key, and if you can get to the point where you can at least restate what your interlocutor is saying that they believe, that you've already come way further than most people when having an argument, right?
Absolutely.
Even if you can't do it so well that you're following the first rule of rapport, but at the very least being able to say, oh, okay, so you believe this, am I right? Not where you come to somebody and be like, oh, you're a Christian, you believe this, this, and this, or oh, you're I hate to keep picking on religion because I feel like it's an easy target, but oh, you're from the other side, oh, you're a skeptic. Oh, so you're just one of those, debunking, no fun dicks, right? So,
great.
If you can meet in a place where you at least understand what the other person is trying to get at, I feel like that's really important.
Yeah.
How is street epistemology different than skepticism? I'm sort of seeing a lot of overlay, and I think you already kind of covered that in the same way that rationality overlays to skepticism.
I would say street epistemology is a tool. It's more fundamentally a tool which can be used for expressing or teaching people about skepticism in a Socratic sort of way, as well as rationality. But I also want to emphasize that as a tool, anyone who in their own mind finds their belief to be rational should find street epistemology to be a great tool for helping to change minds with a rational premise. So you have to be willing to use Socratic method in this sort of way to convince people to question what they believe. And at the end of the day, I think if we're talking about people who value rationality in their beliefs, I think we can come across a good number of people besides atheists who would find street epistemology to be useful. Because, epistemology is about understanding how we know the things that we know. And so, at the very least, if someone feels like their belief is valid, then they should feel no discomfort in learning about other people's beliefs and why they believe them, and asking the sort of questions that would be the kind of questions that would convince them if there was a better answer for them.
Oh yeah, I mean, pick a topic, right? I mean, anti-vaccination, global warming. There's people on both sides that are very strongly opinionated, and there are people on both sides there are people on both of those issues that are wrong. But being able to talk coolly about whatever your disagreement is, I just think that's hugely key. But as far as the difference between, like I said, I guess run-of-the-mill skepticism and street epistemology, if I'm hearing you right, I guess you can be a skeptic by yourself in your basement, but you can't be a street epistemologist by yourself in your basement. You've got to be out there talking to people.
Right, unless you're on a video chat or something.
Mm-hmm.
Out there
That's
in
not
mid-space
really
or
by
cyberspace.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
No,
can
you're
we
absolutely-
pick a topic? Is there something you can epistemologize one of us about that we disagree with you on?
I bet.
Okay. Well, I think if I really value my skill set in street epistemology, I might be able to even street epistemologize any of you on something that you believe, which I actually agree with.
I think
So
I
that
might
would
have
be one way
something
to-
that we disagree with.
Okay.
Okay, what's that?
I recently spoke to somebody who was talking about why she was uncomfortable to discuss a belief that she has. And it seemed to be a reasonable explanation, and I was totally cool with her doing that. She wanted to keep a belief, and she was afraid that by looking into it further, she would potentially change her mind, or it was likely that she would change her mind.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't want to go through that process and potentially alienate her friends who held that belief. And it was more important for her to get along with her friends than it was for her to change her belief.
Okay.
Or to look into it further.
So the position is...
Well, you were talking about how people should be comfortable discussing...
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah, but some people aren't even ready to take step one, right?
Yeah.
If you're not ready to look to flinch into the darkness, or look as the lingo
Right.
goes, or if you're not ready to even question your belief, then you're probably not ready to talk to anybody.
My position is it's okay.
To not talk about things?
It's okay to not question your beliefs if that's what you really if you don't want to.
All right, Steve,
Okay.
go.
All right, so trouble with that is that I actually would agree with you, and
Oh.
so would Peter Boghossian.
I can challenge that.
The thing about that conversation, if I were to have that conversation with this individual using street epistemology, I want to establish some of the basics with the individual. Like, if you are wrong, would you want to know that you're wrong? If your belief is incorrect, and I'm not saying that it is, would that be something you would want to know? That's oftentimes a good way to lead the conversation, just to check that sort of thing and make sure you're not stepping on any toes of somebody who might be better off keeping their belief. And so with a response like that, saying, I don't want to lose my friends, I might ask if you possibly had other friends that you know you wouldn't lose and felt that expanded support system. Would that be something you'd be interested in? Like, do you feel like maybe you might want to have more friends so that your group that you can talk to about your thoughts doesn't always feel like it would go away just because they disagree with you?
Hey, your friends aren't diversified enough.
Well, can I jump in here?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think it would depend on specifically what it is that she believed. You know, if it was something harmless, like, I mean, thinking of a harmless belief is actually kind of hard, and that's sort of what I'm considering. Santa Claus. I mean, so that one's pretty nonchalant, but I feel like so she believes in Santa Claus at like 30.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, that, I don't know. I guess you would ask her how she thinks. So, I mean, that one seems too out there, but I guess I'm trying to think of, I'm going to the examples that I gendered earlier, you know, like if it's global warming or anti-vaxxing or something.
In her case, it's a gender politics type question.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Right? So...
Oh, yeah, then if it's just a politics question and it's just about, like, do I want to start expressing a different belief and have all my friends hate me?
And when it's such a non-issue and she would rather have a belief that allows her to be very supportive of her friends.
Gotcha.
But
Right.
she's afraid that if she looks into it further, she might have some conversations and further develop beliefs that would cause her to alienate her friends. Then,
That does sound like a harder question.
yeah,
So, like,
it's a hard question.
Because it's a politics and policy question. It's not like a fact question. So, like, if she was wrong
Right.
on a fact question, you know, about, say, the origin of autism and its connection to vaccines or something super easy like that, then I would be comfortable challenging her and saying, look, it's not okay for you to have this wrong belief, even if it's going to alienate your friends. Your belief isn't private. If you're ever planning on having kids, or if you're talking to people about vaccinating their kids.
I would first ask if they ever plan on having kids, because if they don't, I'd be like, whatever, believe whatever you want.
Nieces and nephews, I mean, you know, friends who might procreate, and then, you know, she'd be talking to the friends, trying to talk them out of vaccinating, maybe they're less informed.
Yeah.
I mean, so, like, it's hard. There was a great essay by William something Clifford called The Ethics of Belief, and he lays out this analogy, or it's a parable, I guess, where this boat captain, ports, and he's getting ready to make a shipment for another, or load the boat for another shipment, and he's thinking, man, I'm wondering if the boat is actually seaworthy. It's been kind of rickety lately. And then he's like, no, you know what? I'm not going to look into it. I don't want to have to deal with it if it is a problem, so never mind. Boat goes out, sinks. So everyone's intuition, which I think is correct, is that it's all his fault. The thought occurred to him to look into it, and he suppressed the belief because he didn't want to go through the effort of what it would mean to admit that he might be wrong. That is, in the belief that his ship was seaworthy.
But if you hit someone with that story on the street, they're going to be like, you're comparing me to a murderous boat captain.
Well,
I'm not talking to you anymore.
Clifford then flips it and ends the story saying the boat went fine, no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Is the ship captain any less culpable? No, because he had no idea whether the boat was seaworthy.
Right.
He wanted to believe it was, so he didn't look into it. So the fact that things worked okay, and yes, I would equate an anti-vaxxer to the boat captain, saying, look, you're afraid to look into this because your belief that whatever your belief about the connection of vaccines to autism is important to you for some reason, and that is enough for you to go about and evangelize this bad epistemology.
Yeah, but if the anti-vaxxer you're talking to isn't just someone you ran across at a bus stop, if it's like a coworker or a cousin or someone you have to interact with not daily, but frequently, you don't want to just accuse them, and then they're going to be even less likely to listen to what you have to say after this because they will identify you as the hostile enemy side that must be defended against.
Steve, let's say that I'm against vaccines because I think that they cause autism in children. How would you talk to me?
Okay, let me see if I understand this. You believe that when a doctor gives a child a vaccine, that it always causes harm to the child, or has a high potential?
That there's a higher chance of them, a significantly higher chance of them developing autism, which will make their lives more difficult potentially.
Interesting. And would you have a number that you could set to what you think the probability of that, the likelihood of them being harmed would be? Do you think it's
I'm pulling this out of my ears, so this is not fair to anti-vaxxers. But let's say, yes, I read a study in which the normal level of autism is 10%, but among kids who have vaccines, it's 15%. And that concerns me because I know that autism can really impact a person's life.
Oh, okay.
Negatively, potentially.
So you've read an article, and that article said that 10 to 15%, you said, of children can be harmed by vaccines?
Well, rather that there's a significant increase of 5% in kids who have vaccines versus not. And since that's a scientific article, I'm very concerned about that. And now I feel like people are trying to cover it up because Big Pharma.
Okay, so if there wasn't that particular argument, is the article the main reason why you believe? Like, if that article wasn't there, would you still believe that vaccines cause harm to children?
No, I don't think I would.
Okay, well, and that's pretty interesting. So then, hypothetically, if I had another study to show you, and I'm not saying that I do, but if I had one, which suggested the opposite, would that change how strongly you feel about vaccines?
Well,
Will that change your opinion about vaccines at all?
I'm aware that there are articles, that there are scientific articles that suggest the opposite. But if there's, I don't know which way to go with this. Either I think that there's some sort of conspiracy and people are being paid off, or I think that even one article that strongly suggests a connection is enough, and those other ones that any Let's go with that one.
That any risk is too much risk.
Any risk is too much risk for our children's health.
Right. So yeah, you're going to have individuals who will say that, right? And you'll also have individuals who probably they'll change the subject from being about the article to being about, let's say, an anecdotal, story. This friend really close to me, I know they had a vaccine and, everything went wrong with their child.
Thank you for helping me with this.
Child has autism. Right?
I was just going to say, Katrina convinced me that she was passing the ideological Turing test for an anti-vaxxer pretty well, up until she started saying, I think it was more the first that you'd get in most of the anti-vax crowd, and less of the second, any risk is too much, would be more like a conspiracy thing. Not like the Bayesian reasoning of like, well, if I still have to update a little bit in favor of this one article. But I liked that was fun.
No, it's the anchor bias that we were talking about, in which the first piece of information that I got, I'm adjusting away from it with additional articles, but not enough.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
And so what I usually find is that when you ask a little more about if the article itself, if you've asked them, like, what's your strongest evidence, and they say it's an article, and then when you ask them, so if the article wasn't there, would it change your mind at all? Then rather than answer that question, they would go, oh, but there was also this story that I heard personally, and there's more articles, and here's a whole library you can research, go fetch. You can go find all that information, just read the whole library and everything in it, and while you're at it, read the whole internet, and then you'll know. And the technique with street epistemology is to go like, well, okay, I understand, and there are these other things, but can we just stick with what your strongest evidence is, or your personal reason happens to be for why you believe? Because I'd like to know, like, if you're right, then I want to know. I want to know if you're right, then I want to also know for the right reasons that you're right, that your belief is correct. So if we could go back, is the article really the strongest piece of evidence you have? Because ultimately, if they don't, and sometimes what you can do is, well, what you should often try to do is get sort of a measure. So I could ask, on a scale of 0 to 100% confidence, 100% confidence being you believe vaccines are absolutely causing harm to children, and that this claim is true, and 0% being you absolutely don't believe that vaccines cause any harm whatsoever to children, where would you be on your confidence level, right? And most of the time, I'd say ballpark figure, maybe about 55 to 60% of the time, you get the response 100%. Like, just are absolutely no budging, and oftentimes they say it without even realizing what that means in a real sense. So then later you can come to ask them, okay, so if this article wasn't true, or if I had an article which had a similar kind of evidence and amount of evidence that was sufficient to argue against vaccines causing harm to children, would that change your belief in any way? And if they say no, then you have to point this out to them that, well, see, the problem here is it fair to really say that this is why you believe, if when it comes to articles written about studies being done on vaccines and the relationship to autism isn't what would actually sway you? What would really be the reason why you believe? Like, is there something that was more strongly like?
Yeah, it's like a user-friendly version of, is that your real objection?
Say again?
It's like a user-friendly version of, is that your true objection?
Yeah.
Neat.
Pretty much.
That strikes me as hugely Socratic, kind of just not beating them down, but that's how Socrates made it look. Wearing them down, or maybe getting to the bottom of it just through clarifying questions.
Breaking things down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the more clarification you ask for, the more that you can reveal to them that they're not really coming from where they think they're coming from.
I think the most important aspect of both the Socratic method and, street epistemology, which it seems to be based on, is getting people to stop thinking of arguments as fights where you're on two separate sides and one of you is going to win, and start getting people
Right.
just to think of their own beliefs and try to examine them, and not viewing you as the enemy.
Right. And
Exactly.
That's something that I heard Steve and Socrates both express, was a willingness to, like, I really, if you're right, I want to change to believe what you believe, but I'm just not convinced yet. Can you try and convince me?
I have a couple of questions. First of all, Aniash, could you explain what is that your true objection is?
Oh, it's
So,
basically
for people who don't know?
it's basically exactly what he said. It's a essay by Eliezer where he said the same kind of thing, that people often give an objection, and when you refute that or overturn it, they say, "Oh well, I have this other objection, and my original estimate has not changed at all." And his point was, well, then that obviously was not your actual rejection. You were just throwing up, blade of armor, whatever you want to call it, other bulwarks to stymie me. Can you please get to what your actual true objection is, so we can make progress?
I see. And then my other question is for Steve. Through your practice, have you ever been able to update your own beliefs?
Yes. At least I remember the feeling of updating my own beliefs.
When was that?
Well, the simplest example that comes to mind is with my own mother. Like, I believed before that she really didn't give her beliefs any thought whatsoever, and that it was just the title that she put over her head of Christian, and she liked going to church each week. And I don't even know if she's even listening to the sermons, let alone has any thoughts to contribute about them. Because my whole life, whenever we've gone to church, I wanted a conversation afterward about what the sermon was about, and she, whether I was a believer or not, wanted nothing to do with it. So we just never engaged or felt like we could be on the same level when it comes to talking about religion. But then in the course of actually talking to her about her beliefs, I learned that she actually gives them a lot more thought than I gave her credit for. And so there was, I guess, more or less, I felt generally more cynical, I would say, about other people and what they're capable of, until I was able to engage them with street epistemology. And now I actually have the confidence to go into a conversation with, say, not too long ago, earlier this week, I conversed with a individual who's a white supremacist, and he's just a young guy who has these beliefs, which he, I guess, was raised with. It's hard to say how he came about them per se, but I was able to comfortably engage him, knowing that that would be a very uncomfortable conversation to have, and learn more about him as a person, as opposed to how the ignorance of his belief would otherwise define him to me.
Have you ever run into someone who was absolutely not interested in having a dialogue, who just wanted to attack and make you look bad? What do you do in those situations?
Typically, I troll right back at them in some way or another, but that's just me being my bratty self. In no way is that SE. But yeah, sometimes you really, as far as street epistemology is concerned, you have to figure out which individuals are worth talking to further. The simplest being, like in the case of the person who believed that if they changed their belief, their life would get worse, or that there was a problem with that. Really, anybody that you come to and ask the question, if you were wrong, would you want to know? If they say no, whatever their explanation, rationality and you trying to argue rationality to them has left the room. You now need to have, if anything other than thank you for your time, have a nice day, you want to dig a little more into why they feel that way about this thing. Like, if it was true, it would be such a monster to them to find that out. You don't really care to tell them that it's actually true anymore. You care to find out why is it so scary.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important, I think, step to take. Like, once they've admitted that they're not playing the game,
right.
They're like, all right, cool, then we're not playing that game, but I still want to talk to you, just to get to the bottom of this. I feel like that's an interesting step, and it makes it easier to, like you described, talking with that white supremacist and how your mom turned out to be much more thoughtful on the issue of her religion than you'd previously anticipated, it brings home the point that most everybody, and I didn't want to be uncharitable to religious people earlier when I said that I could probably guess what their arguments were. It was just that I've swam in the arguments a lot, and I'd be surprised if some wholly new argument came forth that I had no familiarity with. But the idea that your opponents, for use of that word in this context, aren't like just these soulless monsters. Like you talk to this white supremacist
Exactly.
who most people would just be unwilling to engage with. So like being able to actually sit there and reflect that yes, in a real way, a suicide bomber, a mass shooter, they're people too. That the reason that they did these things aren't just because they're monsters. Like no one's just a monster. I mean, most everybody's not just a monster. There are violent psychopaths who just want to be monsters, but them,
and I'd say
rule,
most
right?
people can be convinced to be monsters if given the right set of premises. The trouble is we have these natural defenses to be violent when it seems like violence might salvage the perpetuation of our species or genes to be violent.
I'm kind of curious. What was the reason? Did you ever find out the reason that your mom
Well, it was
wouldn't
more
talk to
that
you
she
about
just wasn't
religious stuff
interested
after
in
church?
getting that deep into it. But she did finally have a deep conversation when I was simply asking her questions. I guess it's just when I was telling her, like, whether as a kid or an adult, like, you know what I thought about this when the preacher said this and that? And she's just like, I gotta think about how to cook dinner. I gotta, like, she just, I guess she wasn't interested in that respect. And a lot of times she just doesn't put those kinds of thought processes on the top of her priority list.
Do you think that changed possibly also when you became an adult and, in her opinion, suddenly were
I would
more
say
worth
no,
engaging?
because street epistemology was really the first time I was able to really engage with her on such a deep topic. Every other opportunity, it's really... Like, I always felt frustrated because, for me, it seems obvious to think that if my mom is wrong and she's demanding something of me as the adult or, person whose house I'm living in, if she's demanding something of me and she's wrong, she's clearly taking a stance of, I don't care if I'm wrong, you're going to do it, or this is the way it is. And she in no way seems that irrational in any other context until there's a dispute, right? So whether it's disagreeing over religious beliefs or specifics, I think oftentimes she just tries to avoid any possible conflict or talk about things that we might conflict on because she doesn't feel like she can be ready to defend it all the time. And she doesn't care that I can be able to debunk her. She knows that she doesn't take enough time to think too hard about these things. So she's not ready to let that be the game that we're playing.
I kind of feel like Steve's mom sort of almost has a good point, because if you know that you don't have the time and the intellect and the energy to really delve into something, but you have this person you trust, the priest, who's already done all the work, it's kind of rational to default to them. And if some kid comes around, tries to tell you that everything he said is wrong, you're like, well, I don't have time for this right now. I'm sure you could beat me because I haven't spent a lot of time on this and you obviously have, but my priest has spent even more time than you, so I'm going to go with him.
Yeah, in a sense that is exactly
it's kind of a delegating.
what it's like. But I guess a more clear picture on something that historically between my mom and myself really meant something important to me in terms of where we've disagreed. Back when before I was even 18, she and my stepdad put in a lot of conversation that was basically a warning to me that when you're 18, you're out the door, so you better know what the hell you're doing. All very implied, and taken quite to heart as soon as they were said. And from the time I was a sophomore, knowing that this was going to be the case, I tried to have a conversation with them about, okay, well, maybe I can take over my own life now, and do something like drop out of school, get my GED, and go straight to the community college nearby. And then my life will be in my hands, and I'll be in college even before I'm 18, so you won't have to worry about me, and I'll be out of your hands, right? So she said, no, you need to build your social skills in school and be with people your own age. And I was just like, okay, well, that sucks. And then slowly the time kept ticking as she kept making it clear, when you're 18, you're on your own. And it wasn't like she'd come to me every day saying that or threatening it. It's just whenever there was a fight, whenever there was some reason to think about it, yeah, I'd get the threat. Well, so way back then, I would have really loved some ability to have a conversation with her and be able to potentially convince her that maybe kicking me out or threatening to kick me out isn't a good idea. And now it's been 16 years later after I graduated high school, and I have 2 siblings who are now in junior high and just entering high school. And my mom and I had a conversation where she brought up, it just doesn't seem like in this day and age we can, a parent can actually just throw their kid out to fend for themselves when they graduate high school and are on their own. And I'm like, I am so glad you feel that way now.
I feel you. I was the oldest kid as well, and there is so much ground you break being the eldest kid that your siblings have it so easier afterwards. You son of a bitch, you don't even know what I went through so that you can have this freedom now.
Would you like to see these communication skills taught in schools or somehow available to people earlier on in life?
A good number of things taught earlier in life. Like, I would recommend, if I had anything to say with the education system, to start teaching people or kids the basics of philosophy and human psychology at about the age of 9, mainly because that's the age where they can actually start to comprehend these things, and also the age right before they need to comprehend these things because they're going to be a big focal point in their lives, whether it's them talking to people about religions and various beliefs, or it's them going through hormones that are going to make them feel things which they can't understand or explain, in which they will quickly find some kind of rationalization as to why, and not realizing that, hey, you could be going through mania, or you could be going through depression. This is something to be aware of.
I completely agree. I feel like kids can understand more than we give them credit for, and that there's every benefit to exposing them to the ideas, like you said, of human psychology, of philosophy, general thinking skills, as a core class, from 6th grade onwards. Right? Maybe earlier. How old are 9-year-olds? I don't know.
9-year-olds are 3rd grade.
The 9-year-olds are also 9 years old, but yeah, 3rd grade?
Right. You always subtract 6.
Oh, that works.
When I was 9, my Christian school that I went to was actually trying to teach me philosophy. They just happened to teach it in a way of saying, some atheists try to argue that because of what philosophers say, that means that Jesus isn't really the Son of God. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like a bad argument, but go ahead. So one example of what philosophers say is René Descartes saying, I think, therefore I am. And I didn't have to hear any more to understand that at that age. I was just enthralled, like, oh my gosh, I was just thinking about this and Santa Claus and wondering if I was real. I know I'm real. Thank you so much. Okay. Yeah.
Santa Claus bring on an existential crisis.
So what is it the atheists say about, how does that have anything to do with Jesus? And then they go, but the atheists are wrong because René Descartes himself was a Christian. So there. That is a stupid argument, but oh my gosh, I am real. I'm actually really real.
That was a good takeaway. I like how a lot of early philosophers, when they were trying to make arguments against something that they thought was bullcrap, would first say, this is why this is wrong, and then give a really weak case for why it was wrong. They're technically towing the party line while sneaking in all the reasons that it's wrong.
Yeah.
Because back then, if you went against the church, you got tortured. They were like, I am supporting the church. Here are these really flimsy counter arguments to these really good arguments. But yeah.
Steve, I'm wondering what you think is both the future of street epistemology in general, where it's headed, and also what the future is for you.
In general, it's a growing movement now, and there's not only can you find at streetepistemology.com, you can find videos, instruction in videos, tutorial videos, and examples, as well as they even have a playlist of the critics of street epistemology that are on YouTube so far. And they are right now in the process of beta testing in New Zealand and I think somewhere else an app called the Atheos app. And I helped to beta test it in its early stages. It's basically an app where you are given sample situations of what your interlocutor could be asking of you or stating outright, and gives you multiple choice of what possible responses you might have. And it has some that are pretty tricky, and they explain, when you pick one that they've selected as the correct response, they explain to you, and you can read more about why this is more ideal than any of the others, because it sets the critical thought in motion one way, as opposed to avoiding the in-your-face answer or the one that might distract them from the topic. So I find that street epistemology is really growing in that sense, and eventually it will probably hit a peak. My hopes for it is that it will first connect much more intimately with the atheist movement and the rationalist movement, and that if nothing else, something better might come of it, like an even better model can be formed after testing this one out for a while.
Do you have any resources for people that like to read? Because I went to streetepistemology.com and there was almost nothing there to read, and there were videos and such, but I'm not really a video watching person. I'm very much the kind of person who would go through the old Less Wrong website and just read for hours and hours all these text posts. Is there anything like that you could point to?
Well, there's the Street Epistemology Facebook group. You can ask to join that, and it's not too hard to get accepted. And so there's people you can talk to through text there. There's also the book itself, really, that defines and establishes what street epistemology is, a manual for creating atheists. It's hard to get past the title, I know, but I will assure anybody listening, the title, A Manual for Creating Atheists, is actually a bait-and-switch tactic, where in the book itself, Boghossian even explains that he's not really trying to create atheists, or he isn't really trying to convince you to be an atheist. He just thinks that atheism will be a logical result that will spread after people utilize a technique like street epistemology. And what he really wants is for you to learn how to engage with others civilly about what they believe and why they believe it.
I've always felt the exact same thing, that if you just teach people to love the truth enough, they'll seek it out on their own, and eventually they'll get to atheism on their own. I know, I'm stupid and idealistic.
Yeah, I think that's how most people become atheists.
Yeah.
Whether or not
they're just confident.
But it's also somewhat insulting to imply that anyone who is still a believer is someone who doesn't love truth enough to look into that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I try not to say that, but I still have that, hope and belief inside me. The purpose really isn't, the objective isn't to really convince people to be atheists. It's to be open enough to even find that maybe if you heard a new argument, you might discover that you want to change your mind and no longer be atheists. It's just, we know that this technique leads you more down the more rational path, whatever that may be.
Awesome.
So how long, we're getting up to the 1 hour mark, so we should probably cut this short soon, but how long do you think it would take someone to become versed enough in street epistemology to give this a try? How much effort does it take?
I think it would take about a half hour of listening to Anthony Magnabosco. If you're a good study, watch some videos on Anthony Magnabosco's YouTube channel, where he engages with people at a college campus in Texas, in San Antonio, and he shows you through the questions that he asks and through his own demeanor exactly what street epistemology is. So if you're a quick study, I would watch his videos for a while till you get comfortable with it and practice on your own. Maybe even role play with some of us on Blab or on or you can also just test it out through tweets. That's something that helped me to get geared up for it.
Can you send us a few links of a few of your favorite videos, and we'll put them up on the website?
Sure can.
Awesome.
That's a good time to mention that anything you want to plug, by all means.
Well, I've pretty much plugged everything already that I think is quite relevant. A Manual for Creating Atheists by Peter Boghossian. You can catch some people doing street epistemology on Blab, blab.io. If you just sign up for it, maybe follow myself at Young Idealist, or another individual, Doug, is really, really good at street epistemology there and has kind of a cult following. He goes by at P1NE Creek, so Pine Creek with a 1. And yeah, so I think that's pretty much... Oh, also streetepistemology.com. Great resource to sign up with a newsletter and keep updated with what street epistemology is all about.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you so much for telling us about street epistemology and for joining us today.
Yeah, this was very enlightening.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on. This was a lot of fun. Anything else that you wanted to say, or anything before we...
No, I had a good time. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on this podcast. I'm an uber fan of NEI's HP More podcast and everything that you guys do, so keep it up.
Aw, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Okay, we are continuing the episode with the feedback feature, which we now do regularly.
All right, let's start with Mr. Oliva.
He told us how to pronounce it on the subreddit. It was Oliva. So yes, very similar.
Oliva. Overcompensation bias. In today's episode, it was mentioned that the thought of revering Eliezer is hated to the point that people give him less credence than he deserves. I find this as a common theme in a subset of rationalists. Overcompensation bias is characterized by once one realizes that they have a bias or that they were factually wrong, they try very hard to change that belief. Many, including me in the past, then swing their beliefs far too far to the other direction because they know that it is a natural tendency to believe what they originally believed. Yes. It is very easy to notice this in yourself and trick yourself into thinking that it's fine to be so far in the opposition because then you will not slip back to your original belief. This, while having some benefits, is a bad strategy to adopt.
I'd never heard it called overcompensation bias before, but I had always heard the term that the newly converted are the most zealous. It seems to be very much a case, and I think rationalists tend to stick... I don't know, do rationalists stick to that much longer than normal people? Maybe not. Normal people do tend to be zealous for a very long time once they convert. But it could be very much a sort of thing where you want to not make that same mistake that you've made in the past, and so you really work hard to never, like he said, to not be sucked in by that. Yeah, to overcompensate.
I have a little bit of a quibble with some of these biases.
Mm-hmm.
There always seems to be a bias, and then there's an opposite bias.
That's...
Right?
Yes.
So there's, which we brought up in the episode briefly, there's the anchor bias, where you have a first piece of information and then you don't update far enough away from that first piece of information.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is the opposite, the overcompensation bias, where you update way too far away from the first piece of information and you go too far. And I've run into that a lot when I was looking at Wikipedia's list of cognitive biases, that there's always a bias and then there's the opposite bias. What is up with that?
Well, that question is, I think, because it's easy to miss the mark going too far either way, right?
Yeah.
But as far as rationality having the lack of zealotry that other things might help, that there's a whole sequence on effective death spirals, right, where you're kind of cautioned against taking this and running all the way with it. But as far as overcompensation bias, I feel like it is a useful technique to employ consciously. If you're doing it unconsciously, that might be a problem. But anchoring is a good example. My girlfriend and I were at the mall some months ago when the Super Bowl was about to happen, and they were selling jerseys next to the food court. And I said, "How much do you think those cost?" I'm betting they cost like $30. And she's like, "Oh, I don't know, 50." And I went over and checked, and then I came back and said, "If I didn't say 30, what would you have guessed?" And she thought for a second. She's like, 75, 80? I was like, "They're like $100." But the point was that she was anchored on mine, and if she corrected away from it, she might have gotten a closer answer. But again, if she corrected too far and said probably 1,200, you're doing it wrong that way too. But I think deliberate overcompensation is a useful tactic.
I think part of it is also the less strong community has... When you first find rationality after having been living in a crazy world for a long time, you tend to get really excited about it. And so the less strong community has been called cultish many times. And it's intensely annoying, but it's also that no one wants to be a cult. Well, at least no one who considers himself a rationalist. And so there's very much a strong overcompensation pushback to not be the cult. It's like the people who immigrate from a different country and then burn all ties and don't keep any of their cultural artifacts around and don't let their children speak the home language in the home anymore because they want to not be associated with that in any way. And I think that's one of the reasons that they overcompensated, because people were like, well, Eliezer is your cult leader. And we're like, nope, we hate him. He's a terrible guy, and he's the worst.
Right. Yeah. So with the example given that Mr. Oliva gave with the general regard to Eliezer Yudkowsky, I think that there is a happy medium to if someone says Eliezer is the true caliphate, it's clear that we're joking. That line, by the way, is not mine. That came from a fun Slate Star Codex discussion. There's a tendency to overcompensate and say that he's just one guy. In fact, he's not even the coolest. But I mean, and that's possibly true. But I think it's we have like.
But then it gets to the point where you cannot quote him at all because then you're over revering him.
Yeah, that sounds like a problem too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Shall we go on?
I think we shall. Adam says, first of all, thanks for these questions. I noticed that our last podcast had a lot of comments in the subreddit, and we're not going to get to all of them, but we'll get to some of them. So, Adam said, I still don't get why you seem to keep bringing up interacting with others and getting their esteem as a terminal value. Talking to you, Inyash.
Yeah, he's aimed at me.
It's sort of a random thing, right? Do you agree that you should care about these things? Probably for Evo Psych stuff, about humans being social and esteem being useful for survival?
Yeah, totally. That's the thing about terminal values. They're not entirely random, but there's no reason or logic behind them. You just have the terminal values you have, and you can't be argued out of them. They can change over time, maybe, but the whole the whole thing of a terminal value is that there isn't any reason to it. It's just what your value happens to be. And in lots of cases for humans, it is due to things that we evolved in. There's a reason a lot of people have sex as a terminal value, and it has to do with passing on the genes. But that doesn't change the fact that it's still something that a lot of people value simply for its own sake.
I'm not sure if esteem for others is actually your terminal value. I feel like
esteem of others?
Yeah. Oh, excuse me, not esteem for, esteem of.
Yeah.
I
don't esteem anyone.
I feel like you're more interested in being happy, and other people esteeming you makes you happy.
Yeah, is that your true objection?
Right. But then that always gets back to the only thing anyone actually cares about is happiness. And sure, okay, but that's stupid to say because what are the things that make you happy? Those are the things that are actually your values.
Yeah, instrumentally in the fact that they get you happy. But I guess, not...
If you boil it down to all everyone wants is happiness and nothing else, then you can give them the happy drug and say that the world is perfect now that everyone is blissed unhappy.
That's true.
And yes, you just haven't tried the happy drug yet.
It's really good, man. So this looks like it was a comment on whether or not we were discussing the impact of
orgasmium.
This is different.
No?
Reducing suffering. I'm moving on to the next question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Yeah. But in the context of when we talked about reducing suffering is possibly easier and more cost effective. Adam says...
Oh, yeah, we said that the internet provides a lot of value, so technically it didn't cost anything to make people happy.
Sure. But also in the next comment here by Adam, deworming seems more like decreasing suffering and has a large economic benefits through increased school attendance and later productivity. So I guess it was just a concrete example of...
him being right and us being wrong.
Well, no, I think it was just a good example. I was on the side of putting efforts towards reducing suffering.
Yeah, I think we should give him props for pointing out that, yes, lots of times reducing suffering also pays for itself and has high economic value.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I thought that was given, but that's absolutely worth spelling out. Next one?
Sure. Okay. Oh, yeah, I like this one. So he says, even though it's obvious that the internet is making people much happier, I'm not sure whether that's actually true. If people just set a new happiness baseline and ultimately end up experiencing as much pleasure / feeling as fulfilled as they did before having access to this new resource, then our naive desire to strive towards more pleasure is just causing a lot of waste. He says, for me, the fundamental relevant question is, are people today actually more happy than they were in the previously in history? Are our brains filled with more happiness chemicals than the brains of our ancestors, and are we experiencing more happiness, quote-unquote, than they were? Did our brains evolve in such a way that they have a capacity for pleasure that went untapped for hundreds of thousands of years, which we are now finally tapping?
No, of course not.
No, and I think that's a very good point, but I don't know what to do about it. He says, I kind of been thinking that the human project of making the world better is fundamentally flawed, and we should all become Stoics or Buddhists or something.
So my immediate thought is, I mean, there's nothing wrong with Stoicism or Buddhism if you're doing it right, but
we've always had the ability to have the same amount of happiness, right? Generally, happiness is comparative, right?
Hansen says, poor people smile.
And in the important way, there's no putting the cat back in the bag. Like, I imagine Adam, the commenter, probably wouldn't be super happy living like our ancestors did. Even though, like, to them, like, finding a body of water that was uncontaminated was like, holy shit, it's like Christmas morning.
But I think the Amish are a good counterexample. They do live like our ancestors. Not in all ways. They cheat in a lot of things. Cheat in quotes. I mean, it's their religion. But they do live much more primitively than we do, but they seem just as happy.
I don't have good ways to measure their happiness, honestly.
Well, me neither.
So I would wonder, and again, I guess maybe comparatively, how happy are they being raised in the Dark Ages under religious indoctrination, as opposed to like living in the first world with all the cool things we have, like electric lights and internet and stuff.
My question is, how happy are you now, and how happy would you be if you had worms?
Right. Well, that worms is a much more concrete example, which is I think why the focus should be on, or why a lot of people say the focus should be on decreasing suffering rather than increasing happiness. I think he kind of has a point, but on the other hand, I think we should have an episode on intellectual complexity, because I think the big advantage we have is that our intellectual lives are more complex now than they used to be, or at least have a greater capacity for it, and I think there's more value in that. The whole miserable Socrates is still better than a happy pig argument.
Yeah, those are basically my thoughts too.
We should have an episode about this at some point, and then Katrina can hate us and never talk to us again afterwards.
Wait, an episode about what?
Intellectual complexity.
Okay.
Well, I wonder why you'd hate us afterwards.
Well, I don't know why I'd hate you.
Didn't you say that you think animals have just as much moral worth as humans?
That sounds like a different question.
I did not say that.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
She said that they have more than you...
more than you give them credit for.
That was
okay.
Words, yeah.
That could be true.
Alright, next one. Though you attributed to me in this episode, user Dragon Ball Herpes made the conspiracy theory comment. Sorry, Dragon Ball Herpes, we'll hit you next time.
He went on to quote from a Facebook thread, which I thought was really interesting. So go ahead and... Yeah, that's from the Facebook.
Somehow, somewhere along the line, accusing governments and the powerful of crimes became associated with mental illness, disrespectability, and raging idiocy. And when you pause to notice that, it is incredibly creepy. It's certainly possible to imagine how such a meme could arise naturally, but a little too perfect.
I'm sorry, what meme?
When we're talking about conspiracy theories, that anyone who promotes conspiracy theory is automatically thought of as a idiot and a crackpot.
It's a little too perfect, like the radioactive waste of a propaganda war fought generations back. See, now that sounds conspiracy theory mongering. But that is interesting.
There were propaganda wars fought during the 50s, during communism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, radioactive waste.
Oh, he's being poetic.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
So, that's an interesting thing to put forward. There's an interesting overlap between how... We'll have to have a longer episode on conspiracy theories at some point. What if we promise you that Dragon Ball Herpes, and then we'll leave it there for now. How's that sound?
That sounds good. I do like bringing up any sort of situation where memes seem to promote their own survival, even though they aren't intelligent, and a meme that anyone who accuses the rich and powerful of conspiracies makes you automatically not someone worth listening to is very interesting in that regard.
It sure sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
I'm getting the skeptical eyebrow.
No, I mean, that sounds like a general bulwark shield against anyone who would challenge you as being a conspiracy theorist. He said, isn't it convenient that you believe that conspiracy theorists are crazy?
Yeah, but isn't that convenient? It's interesting.
But
I don't think it's a conspiracy theory at all. I think it naturally arose, partly because they usually are crazy.
There seems to
it's
be enough
these
overlap
things
there.
work out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So to say that it's too perfect, I guess is what's getting me. But it's interesting. It's worth talking about in more depth. Next comment was, I think you may have overreached a bit when you said that it would be immoral to expose someone to ideas that made them choose suicide in the service of good.
Yeah, he has a point there, because a lot of our cultural effort is put into lionizing people who do give their lives for the greater good, for the Spocks or for the Frodos, although Frodo didn't actually die. But you know who I'm talking about, the people who do sacrifice themselves for their societies.
Or the person who literally jumps on a grenade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those sorts of people are awesome, and so we have great reason to promote that. So
also, yeah, people are talking about with self-driving cars. That's a question that's come up recently. Should a self-driving car AI protect the driver at all costs? Yeah. Or should it, under some circumstances, cause the death of the driver in order to save 5 orphan children? I don't know.
500 orphan children.
500 orphan children. And so the answer is 500 orphan children, obviously.
As long as it's spelled out clearly in the EULA.
So I
want to know what I'm getting into if my car's going to take me somewhere, if it's going to decide to kill me.
So I will concede that yes, I was definitely overreaching a bit when I said that it would be always immoral to expose people to those ideas. But on the other hand, there's the group of people I am familiar with often suffer from crippling amounts of self-loathing because they feel like they are worthless and they're not doing enough good in the world, and they should be spending a lot of effort on helping other people and none on themselves, and it leads to terrible amounts of depression.
And it's not helping anybody.
No. So that is what I am reacting against. I don't have a problem with not enough people trying to save society. I have a problem with people sacrificing themselves for no good reason and ending up being depressed.
Yeah, it's not sustainable is what you're talking about, is that if people are sacrificing themselves at the expense of their own well-being, then they can't do more good.
I believe the term is scrupulosity, and I will link to that as well in the show notes, that there are people who have a pathological sort of need to help others, and I've seen it ruin lives.
I'm just picturing 8 soldiers pushing and shoving to see who could jump on the grenade. And then, of course, no one's better off. But that's not exactly how this play out in real life. So.
No. Oh, yes, and he brought up, which is also a thing that I copied here.
We're still talking about Atom?
Yes, this is the very last point, still with the immorality of exposing people to ideas to sacrifice themselves. He says, this is why it's nice to have something like the Giving What We Can pledge. And I agree completely. The Giving What We Can pledge is a pledge that you will give 10% of your income to a charitable foundation.
Or what you can.
Yes.
Wasn't it based off of Peter Singer's income calculator, where you put in how much you make, and I think it might just be just how much you make, maybe with your expenses, and it's looks like you could give 3%.
I believe.
Or whatever it turns out to be.
Probably. The one I'm familiar with is the Scott Alexander post saying, look, if you're giving 10%, you are a good person. So give what you can in that regard, and that set aside a percentage of your income that is reasonable to help other people, and don't stress out so much about every single ice cream that you have.
Gotcha.
Okay, Not Without Incident says, Wikipedia used to have a page listing conspiracy theories that turned out to be true, which was later removed. Of course, this set off conspiracy theorists.
They should put that back up. That's all I can say. I've looked into trying to find some ways to find out what were conspiracy theories that turned out to be true, and if I could go to my old pal Wikipedia and figure that out, that'd have been great. So thanks for screwing us.
Yeah. He also linked the common thread when they were discussing about whether they should delete it or not, which he said was really interesting, so I'll link that as well.
Oh, please.
Finally, this one is aimed at you, Mr. Oliva. Oliva? Did I pronounce that right?
I don't know.
Okay, Mr. Oliva says to Katrina, there are some problems with infinities in morality. If something is infinitely bad, then doing it twice is exactly as bad as doing it once, which is as bad as doing it indefinitely.
I knew it!
The same goes for infinitely good things. This is why it is necessary to define it as some very large value, not infinity. What did you know?
Booyah! Mr. Oliva agrees with me and explained it very well. Thank you. I was attacking Jason about saying that suffering is infinitely bad or approaches infinitely bad.
And I was saying, you can't work with infinites. It's not gonna work out. But I'm not good at explaining things, and Mr. Oliva is, so thank you.
Woo-woo! Props to Oliva. And finally, by the time this goes up, we will have had a new logo put up on the webpage. Yay! We all want to give a personal shout out to Jess Dickey for designing the new logo for us.
Thank you, Jess. It looks lovely.
Thanks, Jess. We're really excited.
If they get a link to us, to their professional site before this episode goes live, it'll be included in this show's notes.
All right. Huzzah!
Cool. Thanks, Jess. This is great. And thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Bye.